Barnaby Brocket, Chapter 7, approaching from a northwesterly direction. Barnaby closed his eyes as he didn't want to watch the ground disappearing beneath him any longer. He didn't suffer from vertigo in the way that Stephen Hebden did, but still the higher he rose, the more frightened he became. When he finally dared to open them again, a flock of galahs had gathered beside him and were hovering there, staring with impatient expressions on their faces, unhappy that their airspace was being invaded by an 8-year-old boy. They pecked him a little, flapping their feathers in his face, but flew on a few minutes later, leaving Barnaby to rise higher in the sky. He glanced to his left and was pleased to see something. Another creature, perhaps, approaching in the distance, a little higher in the sky, but making its way towards him. He watched and soon realised that it wasn't a creature at all, but a basket with a large balloon hooked above it, and a giant flame keeping the whole thing aloft. "Help!" cried Barnaby, waving his arms in the air, which only made him ascend even faster. "I'm over here!" The hot air balloon continued to approach from a northwesterly direction, and it soon became clear that if Barnaby timed things accurately, he could position himself underneath it at precisely the moment it reached him. He flapped his arms and kicked his feet like a deep-sea diver making his way to the surface of the ocean, before slowing down a little, keeping both eyes fixed firmly on the balloon. A few minutes later, it was almost directly above him, and Barnaby flapped again until he ascended another few feet, banging his head against the underside of the basket. "Ow!" said Barnaby Brocket. "Who's down there?" came a voice from within, a female voice of a certain age. "Help me, please!" cried Barnaby. "Can you pull me into your basket?" "Heavens above!" said another voice, another female voice of the same certain age. "It's a little boy, Ethel. Fetch me the fishing net." A strong silver pole with a threaded hoop at the end emerged from the balloon and scooped Barnaby up, pulling him through the air and depositing him on the floor of the basket. And he started to float upwards towards the flame. "Please," he cried, "tie me to the side. Otherwise I'm going to be burned alive." "Heavens above," said the two women in unison, grabbing him by both arms and doing exactly as he'd asked. Once he was safely secured, they stared down at him with a mixture of amazement and recognition. "I know you," said the first woman, whose name was Marjorie, pointing a wrinkled finger at his nose. "I saw you on the news last week. You were the millionth person to climb the Sydney Harbour Bridge." "The 10 millionth, actually," said Barnaby. "Who is he?" asked Ethel. The women both had hairstyles that resembled crow's nests, and a collection of knitting needles and chopsticks held the entire mess together. "Who did you say he was, Marjorie?" "You remember, dear. We saw him on the television the evening we arrived. He climbed the bridge with his school friends and set some sort of record. Everyone got terribly excited. Then it turned out that he kept floating away. It was a very odd business." "Oh, that boy," replied Ethel, peering down at Barnaby. "Was that really you?" "Yeah, that was me," he admitted. "But what are you doing up here? It's not often we have to pull people into our balloon, you know. In fact, it's the first time." "The second, Ethel," said Marjorie. "You must remember the human cannonball over Barcelona." "Oh, yeah, of course. But then he rather fell into our basket, didn't he? We didn't have to scoop him up." Barnaby opened his mouth, but was reluctant to get his mother into trouble. "It's my own fault, really," he said. "I forgot my sandbags, and before I knew it, I was up in the air." "Sandbags?" asked Ethel, frowning. "They keep my feet on the ground." "Well, no good ever came of that." "There's not much we can do about it now anyway," said Marjorie. "I hope you don't think we can take you back to Sydney." "Here you are, and here you have to stay." "But I need to go home," said Barnaby. "Can't be done, I'm afraid, even if we wanted to. It's the winds, you see. They don't blow us back in that direction. We have to go east. Lucky for you, the world is round, eh? If this was the 14th century, then the whole world would still be flat and we'd all fall off the edge." Barnaby frowned as he tried to make sense of this. Behind him, perhaps only a few miles away, were the northern suburbs and the house where his parents, brother, sister and dog lived. He surely wasn't going to have to go all the way around the world to see them again, was he? "He's being dishonest," said Ethel, leaning forward and looking him directly in the eye. Marjorie, I tell you, he's being dishonest. All little boys lie. That's a scientific fact. But this one is easy to read. I can see it in his eyes. Tell the truth, boy. What are you really doing up here? Barnaby was about to proclaim his innocence, but something about these two ladies suggested to him that they wouldn't let him alone until he came clean. And so he decided to tell the full story, warts and all. But that's outrageous, said Ethel when he was finished. Shocking, agreed Marjorie. What kind of mother would do that to her child? You know very well what type of mother, Marjorie, said Ethel sadly. As do you, Ethel, said Marjorie in an equally sorrowful voice. And by the sounds of things, the father was in on it too. Absolutely disgraceful. And you want to go back to them, do you? Ethel asked, looking at Barnaby as if she couldn't quite believe that he would consider going home, even after they set you adrift like this.